The scattered and partial remains of the Plymouth track team, wiped out 2 days ago, when a chartered plane attempting a landing in a thick fog crashed into the wild mountainside, will be interred this afternoon in Fallbrook Cemetery.
Poor boys.
Oh, tragic. All those fine young athletic bodies, all those hours of training for strength, speed, endurance, gone to waste.
I would like to, if I may, to start off this episode by reading from the Detroit Free Press, dated Friday, December 6th, 1957. The section of the article is called Stargazing. It's an article by the Free Press movie critic Helen Bauer, and it's called Teenage Horrors. It begins... Originator of the new teenage horror movie cycle, hometown boy and Hollywood producer Herman Cohen has been visiting his father, Meyer Cohen, and his sister, Mrs. William Banks. He's just come from Texas, where his new I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and Blood of Dracula have opened in 75 theaters. A week ago Tuesday in Austin, Herman was invited to talk to 900 University of Texas students from the theater arts, drama, public relations, and journalism departments. Quote, "They asked me what others have asked. Why have you neglected intelligent audiences? I answered that we haven't neglected them, it's the other way around. The intellectual audiences have neglected us." To prove his point, Herman asked how many of his student audience had seen recent movies like The Great Man and others. Few hands were raised. When I then asked how many of them had seen I Was a Teenage Werewolf, they slid down in their chairs and sheepishly raised their hands, related Herman. More than 3/4 of the audience had seen it. The students looked at one another and the whole audience burst out laughing. So this is basically an article just, in the Detroit Free Press, Herman Cohen's hometown, explaining, basically, a local celebrity. He's, it's a way of sort of, I think, relating, even though it's a regional newspaper, I do think the Detroit Free Press is nationally published, or it was at this time, I'm not quite sure, but it conveys that, yes, these movies were kind of, they were kind of marginal, they were very low budget, they operated on the drive-ins and the double feature circuits at local cinemas, but they were definitely making a serious economic impact. Here is this profile of a guy who literally his only claim to fame as of now are 2 movies he made in that very year. I Was a Teenage Werewolf and Invasion of the Saucermen, which is not mentioned in the article. But, it's his only claim to fame really at this point. And I think it's interesting that, it sort of conveys the extent to which that, these things were, drawing attention from people. Like Cohen mentions in the article that I Was a Teenage Werewolf more or less cost about $150,000 to make. By the time of the writing of the article, the movie was released in July. This is December 6th of 1957. That's the other thing about these days, is that movies would run for so much longer than usual, especially if you were a low budget outfit. Often, you didn't have a lot of money for film prints, so you would literally tour them from state to state, from locality to locality. But, by June, this $150,000 movie had grossed $2 million. And this was a point in history where the major Hollywood studios were really struggling. They were trying to compete with television. They were trying to get the youth market. And here comes along this, this Tin Pan Alley, huckster, and he just easily grabs $2 million on a. I'm just like getting a lot out of just looking at this page, because there's also advertisements for a lot of movies, like, and it's actually kind of the best juxtaposition between like the sort of Hollywood that's failing at the time, and not, and the, the infantile attempts to try to grab a youth audience. Like, I'm looking at an advertisement for some sort of a Gene Kelly musical called Les Girls. There's a Walt Disney short called Perry that's being advertised for some reason. Babyface Nelson is being advertised, but there right in the corner is a double feature of the 1956 movie Rodan being double featured with The Disembodied. The author of the article is interesting because she seems to key in on the fact that the filmmakers have basically made a lot of money by not trying to make a good movie. Even the author of the article, she's identifying this as a cycle, which is odd because it wasn't really until 1958 that it broke, that like other studios started imitating the model of doing teen-centric monster movies.
No, I imagine it's probably reflective of the time. I mean, there's nothing to comment on. I mean, but a lot of times they pair things. I remember in the drive-in seeing Mutiny on the Bounty was the first movie, and I fell asleep during that because I was just a kid. And then after that was The Birds. Nice. Now, there were the two pair movies that were in the drive-in at that time, I remember, because I drove there with my aunt and uncle to see it. Now, Mutiny on the Bounty, of course, no kid wants to sit there and watch a ship on the water.
Yeah.
But, although it was a great man, I think it was with Charles Lawton, that one. And then after that was The Birds.
And then The Birds scared the bejesus out
They
of
were
you.
wide awake for the whole of The Birds. So you're talking about when your driving starts about 8:30 when it starts to get dark. And then they run, you probably didn't get home till after midnight, right? It's a double feature at a drive-in.
How double features arise, it sort of ties into even the whole conception of B movies. I've alluded in the past to the idea that calling merely a low-budget movie a B movie is often a misnomer, because B movie, it arises in the 1930s to refer to something very specific, which is that it's literally a movie that is produced at a lower budget that is made to complement your A picture. So you have an A picture that goes first, and you have your lower budget B picture that oftentimes the studio thinks they can make some money on but doesn't have as much faith in. So they'll, because that's the other thing, is that when you went to a movie theater, especially, at least until the 60s, it kind of fell out of practice by that point. When you went to a movie theater through the 30s and the 40s and into the early 50s, you paid one price, and then you basically stayed for as long as you wanted. You bought as much concessions as you wanted. That's right. You just stayed there, and you could also smoke indoors as long as you were in the balcony.
Right.
But you stayed for as long as you want, and the showcase was constant. There would be newsreels, there would be shorts, there would be A pictures, and then you would get your B pictures, and then if you wanted, if you had nothing else to do that day, you could just stay and watch the whole thing play over again.
Not like today, where you have
to... not like today, where they will kick you out. Right, and so, so that's the sort of system in which the term B movie arises.
Right, or B side of a record, right?
Exactly. When we think of a B movie, we're talking about, technically speaking, in a historical sense, we're talking about a specific part of American film history where that's how movies are primarily produced. You have your A pictures, and then you have your B pictures, which exist to complement your premium sort of package. They're there to supplement the programming, as it were, for the theaters that you will then make deals with to show your product. But what we have here in the 50s is that this is where B movie starts to get a little grayer and vaguer. Because with A.I.P, with American International Pictures, the guys who produced these two double features, I Was a Teenage Werewolf and Invasion of the Saucermen, and now for this episode, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and Blood of Dracula, this was a company that didn't have A pictures. They were these self-financing independents. So, like, their whole profit motive was they would make this program, they would make this double feature program, but what they would do is they would say, well, rather than spending a lot of money on one picture and less money on a second bill picture, why don't we just spend the same amount of money on both films? Like, we'll just spend the same low amount on both films, we'll package them together, and then we'll make even more money. You know, and so we get to this issue of, like, is B movie even an accurate term historically?
No, it's, well, unless you call it a whole, like you said, unless you call it low production, low mental acuity pictures. Maybe that's what a B picture refers to.
Yeah, but that's what it means. I think that this is where, like, B movie starts to attain those real connotations of just puerility and lowbrow taste, as opposed to just being a function of being technically cheaper. Yeah. Because, like, okay, I was not I Was a Teenage Werewolf was a huge hit. In particular, Invasion of the Saucermen was, again, that was the B picture I
thought Invasion of the Saucermen was better than I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
I think it's a toss-up, because I think they're both crappy in their own unique ways. Although I was not anticipating how crappy I Was a Teenage Frankenstein was going to be. But yeah, that movie made a lot of money. And so, initially, like, all four of these movies were already written. Like, Herman Cohen and the screenwriter that he worked with, the Abe and Candle, they just cranked out all four of these movies. Yeah, they just cranked out all four of these scripts. And I Was a Teenage Werewolf was just the one they thought had the best chance of making money, because that was the title. Because, oh, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, of course dumb kids are gonna go see that. But so that makes a huge amount of money, and so then what happens is that there's this southwestern theater magnate named Bob O'Donnell, and he's apparently, you know, at the time he was apparently a huge sort of guy in the sort of the Southwest as far as drive-in chains and theater chains. And so he gives Arkoff and Nicholson, Samuel Z. Arkoff and James H. Nicholson, the executives of A.I.P., he gives them a very cushy deal. He says, look, if you produce me a double feature of the same kind, teen-centric horror double feature like the ones you just gave me, and you do it really cheaply, and you have it ready by the Thanksgiving season. And he contacts them on Labor Day. So between Labor Day and Thanksgiving, that's how much time they have to produce these movies and get them all in the can and out. So how long is it between Labor Day and Labor Day is when?
September. Well, in September, right before school, right?
Right. So they literally have 2 months from development to post-production.
It shows.
Yes, it does show. But if they do that, he's going to give them like a huge like premiere at the Flagship Theater in Austin, Texas. I actually don't know where the Flagship Theater is, but it's like a big Texas theater. He's going to give it a huge like sundry premiere there, and they're going to make even more money. And so, you know, and so Arkoff and Nicholson, they go back to Herman Cohen. And they have him, all right, you've got 2 more of these scripts lying around. I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and Blood of Dracula. We've got to start shooting now so that we're done by Thanksgiving. And so that's how we get into the situation where that's how the the production begins, because the film was already developed. These things were already written. And the thing that I noticed, and it's kind of impossible to not notice, is that, you know, unlike I Was a Teenage Werewolf and Invasion of the Saucermen, at least plot-wise and tonally, those 2 movies are pretty different from one another. So even if I didn't really like either of them particularly, at least there was a change of pace after the first hour, even if the next hour was also kind of interminable. In the case of I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and Blood of Dracula, both movies have basically the exact same plot as I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and they are both exactly as bad as I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
They're not as bad
except
as
even or even perhaps even worse.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, come on. What is better about I Was a Teenage Frankenstein?
Oh, that's worse.
Yes, I think that one's definitely bottom of the barrel for me. Like,
I don't,
it's just
well,
like it,
you know, you have to be fair to the writers. I mean,
I do not have to be fair to the writers. I don't.
Maybe because I enjoyed it because you were joking all along through the picture.
Yeah, well,
So-
like I had to do something. My skull was cracking open.
But you were surprised by the alligator.
Yes. Oh, yes. There. Because okay, so just to show you how identical these two movies are, especially I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and To I Was a Teenage Werewolf, who is the protagonist of our who returns as the mad scientist?
Some angry, neglected scientist of some sort.
What's his name? Who's playing him?
Whit Bissell.
Yeah, Whit Bissell, same guy who plays the mad psychiatrist / biochemist / nuclear apocalypticist / Jungian psychotherapist of I Was a Teenage Werewolf, appears again as in the much more modest role of Victor Frankenstein's grandson, who I think his name is like, I don't know, like
Frankenstein.
but his first name.
Oh, I don't know.
I really should have looked up
Yeah.
what his first name was. I think it's like Alfred or something. At least with I Was a Teenage Werewolf, it opens with something exciting, right? It opens with a fight. It opens with two teenagers going at it. The camera is moving around. It's action. The music's going. Dun, 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 dun. I Was a Teenage Frankenstein opens in a conference room.
And so, gentlemen, it's my firm belief that just as we can take the healthy eyes of a condemned criminal after his execution, and with these alien eyes restore sight to a deserving blind man, so also can we successfully transplant other organs and members of the body, attaching and grafting them where needed, even in cases where important arteries and nerve centers have been severed.
Professor Frankenstein, how can you ask us to believe such a preposterous theory?
It opens in a conference room in which Professor Frankenstein is giving his lecture basically on who knows, but it's Frankenstein, so you know it eventually dovetails to the idea of reanimating human tissue. Because there's never been a Frankenstein who has ever learned a lesson, and apparently at no point has anyone...
I think you're being you're being too cruel. I mean, really. What's really amazing
Why
to
would
me,
you open this movie that way? It's just talking. It's just talking. Everyone understands the premise of Frankenstein. You don't have to have the character do the whole thing.
He didn't want to make the mistake his grandfather did.
You can't be serious. You don't dare.
Don't dare. You know, I'm sure that someone spoke those same words and hurled that same challenge at that great ancestor of mine whose name I bear. And believe me, I'm serious. You see, the knowledge, the know-how, as you Americans put it, is in my blood. It's my heritage. But where Baron Frankenstein created a monster, I shall bring forth a perfectly normal human being, able to walk among normal people undetected. I'll point the way to perfection in the human race.
That's the other thing that's confusing.
He says that, right?
And
you learn.
I don't remember.
And kids learn something because there's Shakespeare in it too.
I think
At least twice.
Here's the thing.
Twice he quotes Shakespeare in that movie.
He references his grandfather, Frankenstein, exactly once. And it's this case where it's not clear if his grandfather is the, like, original Frankenstein who brought a corpse back to life and it went on a rampage.
Or some version of
of Frankenstein where nobody knows the story of Frankenstein. Because in the opening scene in the conference room, there's this, like, you know, of course you have to have this other scientist who's like, well, I object to you even going on these wild speculations, you know,
Right.
And he's got to play the cool hand of being like, well, I'm gonna stick to my theories, and now I've got to prove...
Right.
You know, it's like, so, yeah, but he talks about his grandfather's legacy, but it's like, okay, what's going, like, obviously, I know they didn't care, But anyway, yeah. So
I'm amazed at is that these actors actually perform these roles with such solemnity.
with such grace.
Without actually, how many takes without cracking up? I mean, some of the shit that some of the stuff that he says. I mean, he just is absolutely in his sexism.
Yeah, he has a. Oh yeah, yeah. Frankenstein is really, really sexist in this movie.
And of course, the woman deserves to die because she's stupid. I mean, I can't really. Some of the
Phyllis Coates plays.
Well, she's actually a good actress.
Plays the love interest Margaret. Basically the way her love is compared to Frankenstein is that he basically says, "Hey, look, I'm going to be completely preoccupied with my work, but if you want to be my secretary and basically field any attempts by anyone to get into contact with me and interrupt me, that'd be cool, and then we could get engaged and married that way." And she compares herself to a watchdog.
I want to see no one but my associate, Dr. Carlton. And of course you.
I'll be the best watchdog you ever had.
So it's not just him. It's like the whole ether of this movie.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, but it's not even anachronistic. That's the wrong term. You know what I mean? But when you look at it, when you're younger, you don't. You don't have that feeling.
Because, it was the 1950s when you watched it. Like that, this was Tuesday for you. Like right. People, you would probably be in gym class, and like a gym instructor would probably just offhandedly say something about how his wife was such a battle axe.
Adventures of Superman. How do you like that?
No, yes, Phyllis Coates. Yes, she played Lois Lane.
Lois Lane.
She played Lois Lane not George Reeves. Steve Reeves was the
George Reeves.
Steve Reeves was his Hercules. George Reeves was the original TV Superman. This movie was more or less all shot on the Ziv company production lot, and Ziv were a TV production company. And so basically the movie was filmed there, the A.I.P. basically rented out a couple studios. Everything was filmed on set. There's very little location photography. I don't think there's any location photography, actually. That also ties into our director. So again, also unlike I Was a Teenage Werewolf and Invasion of the Saucermen, which were directed by two different people, again, you could at least say they were distinct. Like they had different stories, a little bit of a different vision. These were both written by the same people, but they were also directed by the same guy, Herbert L. Strock. He was kind of an interesting character. He began working in the film industry when he was 17. He was still a student in Beverly Hills High School when he would direct segments for Fox Movietone News, specifically the celebrity gossip columnist sections of it. He did that in the mid-30s. He studied journalism he graduated USC in 1941, and then he served in the Army Ordnance Motion Picture Division. And then after the war, he basically spent most of his time as an editor, and then transitioned in the early 50s into television, where he probably is most known for producing and directing 13 episodes of The Cases of Eddie Drake in 1952, and I'm assuming, just from the title, it seems like that must have been, some sort of noir or mystery show.
Was that what Ed Cookie Burns? Wait a minute, The Cases of Eddie Drake. Let me think.
His first, he had done low budget movies before. He didn't actually direct initially. But his first forays into low budget movies were Ivan Tor's Office of Scientific Investigation trilogy. Now this is one I want to get to eventually. This was a trilogy of independently produced science fiction movies that all are about a fictional semi-secret organization called the Office of Scientific Investigation, OSI, which seems to have been an influence on, the weird thing about that was I read OSI, and I sort of realized that, that's what the reference to is in, there's this cartoon called The Venture Brothers, where there's this secret spy organization called OSI, which are supposed to be the good guys, but they're also kind of clandestine bad guys, just like everyone else in the show. But So that's where that comes from. And he started working on those movies. The trilogy was The Magnetic Monster in 1953,
I saw that.
Riders to the Stars in 1954, and Gog in the same year.
I don't remember GOG.
On those movies, he would juggle all sorts of duties. He produced, he directed. He also did some uncredited editing and associate production on Donovan's Brain in 1953.
Which is a good movie.
Yeah, which we also covered. He also directed 19 episodes of the sci-fi anthology series Science Fiction Theater between 1955 and 1956. And so he mostly, after that, he mostly directed for the Ziv television programs. He was working on that studio a lot. And that's actually how Herman Cohen found him. In Tom Weaver's Return of the B Science Fiction Heroes, he relates in an interview with Strock how basically the way Strock came in contact with Cohen was that Cohen would basically just walk on to the Ziv studio lots. Apparently he would know people there and they would let him on, and he would basically, it's kind of like a guy who's going to a high school football game. He's scouting for talent. He's scouting for people who can get stuff done quickly and cheaply. And after observing Strock for a while, he says, "Hey, do you want to do I Was a Teenage Frankenstein?" And so that's how we get the origin of this movie.
Who did the camera work on that?
I Was a Teenage Frankenstein?
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to know who the camera people are. I know that Strock, like you said.
Well, I will say this. The camera work in I Was a Teenage Frankenstein is about as flat as you can get.
It is.
It's some guy named Lothrop B. Worth. It looks like, he was also
It was the one on after that?
He was the cinematographer on Gog.
Oh.
So, it looks like there was a sort of... That was something that also happened, is that it seems like Strock was able to bring on people that he had known from previous collaborations to help work on the film. So Gene Fowler Jr. was the guy who directed I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and just like Fowler before him, Strock was not a particular fan of the script he was given, and I actually do have
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
I have some quotes from him. Do you want to read this one? Because it might feel boring if it's just me droning on.
I would receive the scripts practically finished, and I would say, "These stink. These are bad. This should be done this way, or this should be done that way." And we would work it out together. I tried awfully hard to correct a lot of things. You find that a writer, especially of this caliber on these pictures, really doesn't read the dialogue out loud. And you have to do that because actors have to speak the lines and they have to mean something. There was never any argument with Herman Cohen about rewriting dialogue, but restructuring was a real problem. I remember having violent arguments with Herman over story points, over illogical things in the script, over time warps that were absolutely ridiculous. You didn't know where you were or when this was supposed to happen or how it happened. And he just didn't want to listen. So finally, Mary Whitlock Gibson, the script supervisor, Strock brought along with him, and I got together and rewrote and did things that we thought had to be done. After much arguing, Herman finally accepted. Cohen, right?
Yeah, Herman Cohen.
But he's the one that had found the talent, right? But he argued it's kind of very strange.
Yeah, this is the other thing.
Yeah.
He was kind of an ego. This is great because I should have done this research earlier, but I don't think I didn't. It's good that I was able to find this book because it's full of great interviews with these guys, and apparently Cohen was kind of an egomaniac. Do you want to read the next poll quote?
Yeah, it says, "I thought Herman was a strange bug. He wanted things his way, and that's the way he wanted them, and he wanted a director that would do things his way. He was a very wishy-washy guy who tried to be very pontific, which he couldn't be. He had no guts. I had very little respect for him, and I guess he knew this. I remember Herman and I had a terrible fight over something. I don't remember what it was. I told him where he could go and what he could do with his picture, and I would quit. And everybody on the crew was behind me. They wanted me to quit. But when I got down to the nitty-gritty, I just felt it was the wrong thing to do, and it would be spread all over town that I walked off a film, and I stuck with it. but from that day on, Herman and I did not get along too well.
Yeah, so that's like it's this thing where like it seems like Strock, he was kind of more doing these movies as an avenue to try to break out of television because at one point I remember in the interview he refers to working in television as a sausage grinder. And it becomes this thing where it's like, okay, so you've gone out of one sausage grinder, which is, and obviously television can be extremely stressful as a career point. Like I don't, nowadays most of our media consumption is television. But I don't think a lot of people understand that you're talking about a medium where the content is more or less often, just one season of a television show content-wise is the equivalent of like sometimes like a 9 or a 12-hour movie, and all of this stuff needs to be you're constantly shooting things out of order because you're not gonna shoot each episode sequentially. That doesn't make any sense. Some sets aren't going to be available certain days. Some cast members are only going to be available a short amount of time. You have to shoot them the way you would a film. But at the same time, because you are now doing these often multi-arc or all these disparate kind of stories, you have such an incredible stress on you to do everything as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So for him, this was kind of a way that he wanted to break out of TV and go into film. It just seems, unfortunately, it just seems like maybe I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and Blood of Dracula was not the best way to do that. Not that...
Well, Blood of Dracula is well, we can get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. Like, I do want to...
But I think there's no comparison between the two pictures.
Yeah, Blood of Dracula is definitely the better picture. And, it's like, and I think despite his point about not having a good working relationship with Cohen... I think the fact that Blood of Dracula is the better made film probably speaks to the fact that maybe they did eventually just sort of develop a kind of,
rapprochement.
A rapprochement. Like, look, we just need to get, like, again, because, again, they were
Let's
just,
make
they
money.
were, yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right,
they
right.
were just, again, they had 2 months more or less to do this. They were trying, they had to get this done by the Thanksgiving season. I did want to cite one other thing from the development of the movie, and it has to do with really the only other interesting thing about I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, which is the violent content of the movie. Now, the version that we saw, it's another example of the preservation of the preservation statuses of these movies being pretty poor. Because there is currently no commercially available version of the American cut of I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. The only cut that is available is the British cut distributed by Anglo Amalgamated Pictures, which distributed the film in the United Kingdom in an abridged form that also nonetheless got the X certificate. The X certificate meaning that you can only show it, only audiences 16 and older can get in to see the picture, which is pretty much the prime demographic that A.I.P was appealing to. But it's another weird instance where it's, we're watching this movie and it opens with that British Board of Film Censors seal with that, that very elegant X on the bottom of the screen. And it sort of reminds you that, like, yeah, this was a time when, these movies, they seem so silly and so kind of even antiseptic now. But there was like a genuine concern.
Who was the one with the brain? The one with the woman's head?
The Black Sleep?
No, the Black Sleep was the one with the head, the woman's head. The guy was trying to keep.
Oh, the brain that wouldn't die. Yeah.
Now, that's very violent. How did that get past censors?
Well,
that's more violent. Anywhere more violent than this one, I think.
Well, I think with this, I think this is sort of, they're both sort of part of a trend. Like, again, this is part of the late 50s, from 57 to 59 and into the 60s. We start to see the gap really getting closed on how much blood and how much gore there is in these movies. Because So
the
the
color,
version that we're watching is significantly abridged. A lot of the only ways that, there is one part of the movie where you see the. Okay, so at one
I
point,
don't remember it being that far. From what I remember as a kid, I don't remember it being that much more. I can't remember anything that would be missing in the version that you showed me.
Mostly what seems to be missing is that there is one shot in the movie of a disembodied head. Because, okay, so the plot of the movie is that Whit Bissell has, he's created a perfect man, but it's because it's a teenager, it's a perfect boy. And we'll get into the kind of creepy sexual undertones of the movie in a second, but I just want to speed our way through the plot. That he wants to prove his theories correct, that he can rejuvenate people, that he can attach whole limbs surgically and it would still function. Everything from the arm to the human head and the brain. He can do it.
Let's see. Not the brain. This is where, remember, the brain was kept. The brain was actually, that was intact. That teenager's body had the brain and head. All he had to do is get a new face.
Right.
Right, so let's clarify that.
But that's the thing is, so there's a scene in the movie. So there's a scene. So basically, fortuitously, that very night, as he's talking to his assistant. Also, yes, just like Whit Bissell and I was a teenage werewolf, he's got an assistant, and he literally says the exact same line about him being an accomplice to him when it starts to get too hairy for him. But anyway, there's a car crash outside. This car carrying teenagers is just like on fire, and then there's an exposition dump. Some poor guy comes running up and explains everything.
Right, a lot of exposition.
Despite the fact, and here's where you can start to see what Strock was like working with here in terms of Cohen being an egomaniac who just did not want to listen to criticism, and how incomprehensible this story is. We don't see a lot of people, but we do see a car on fire. We see the guy who survived the wreck from the other car, because the two teenagers are killed. One is on fire in the car, one got thrown from the car, right. And so it's just this old bald guy like having a conniption fit, and there's a couple extras around just to establish that it was sighted.
Right.
But then somehow Frankenstein and his assistant literally just pick up the body and leave.
Well, they go in the woods. He said he thought he saw it. And this is another thing. How the hell did they get the idea that they could just take a body and no one's going to find out?
Exactly. Like Strock said, it's impossible to understand, wait, when is this? Where? Like, right. How are they doing this? What's the continuity here?
Right.
They take the body, and so they take the body of this teenager. They take James Dean's body, and they begin... And then when that's not enough... That it's like, okay, so now we need to find more pieces, because again, it's the same thing with all Frankensteins. Because Frankenstein, it's not enough for him to revive the dead; he's got to create the perfect man.
Right.
Because again, this is all like some weird psychosexual subtext where it's like bound up. It's like the same thing as like he's married to this woman who is basically just his secretary, so that he can work on the thing that he really wants to do.
He's not married to her.
Well, he's about to marry her. Well, they're engaged.
Yeah, so far.
Superficially, they're engaged.
Right.
But the point being is that he puts that up as a pretense so that he can then go into, his private little man cave and work on his perfect man and make the perfect man and, like all these these sort of psychosexual qualities to the story. But... So what happens is there's a plane crash carrying like a football team of other teenage boys. And so in the middle of the night, they just go to the graveyard and again, it's never established how they do it, because presumably like they're just digging up the graves and stealing whatever limbs they think are the best. All right, Who's got the best bicep?
Right.
All right. Which one of these?
Hands of a wrestler.
Yeah. Which one? Exactly. Which one of these teenage boys has the firmest hands? Which one has the best femur? So they make the perfect boy, except he's hideous. His head is still the head of the boy who was in the burning car. The car
Well,
crash.
here's the other thing
So
that's
it's like
improbable is that his accomplice is supposed to be a physicist, and yet he asks him to look at the body and mention what has to be done.
Right, he's not an anatomist.
He's not an anatomist or a doctor.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't know. Oh, yes. And of course, they talk about the fact that
all doctors are the same.
They have to saw below the knee, and yet the leg that they.
Yeah, that's the okay. So yes. We're getting to again. This is where the violence of the movie comes in. Is that again? This is a level of morbidity that for the time was pretty extreme, because there's a scene where they're operating on removing the parts of the Frankenstein subject that aren't useful anymore. Right. And so the character takes a bone saw.
Right.
And he like you said,
off screen.
Yeah, he says he's gonna saw above the knee.
Below the knee.
Below the knee. But then he just takes a whole leg right up to the hip. And it's a pretty good prop. It's a pretty good prop where it's like this, it's this burned, bloody, broken leg with the flesh peeling off.
Right, two hands, right.
And it's, and so again, for the time, this is pretty morbid stuff. And so, that stayed in the UK cut. What seems to have been edited out is that, like you're saying, later in the movie, that becomes a whole thing, is that the way Frankenstein keeps control over the boy, who also learns to speak. He learns to speak.
Immediately.
Pretty much immediately he's capable of speaking. But Frankenstein, the big thing is that the boy wants to go out and walk among normal people. He wants to get out. It's like, it's like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He just wants to be out there among the Millers and the Weavers and their wives. It's like just, it's, and so he says, all right, we're going to get you a new face. And so it's like a father-son trip. It's take your kid to work day. He takes the kid out in the middle of the night in the shittiest disguise ever. It's basically just a fedora, a scarf, and a trench coat. And he takes him to Lover's Point. Where all the teenagers park. There's always a Lover's Point. Did you guys have a Lover's Point when you were a kid? Because this appears constantly in movies.
No, but they exist. Because Lover's Lane in Princeton. I mean, no, they exist. It's actually called Lover's Lane from the historical perspective. No.
Okay. All right. So, but anyway,
which he found out by taking his fiancée.
Yes, he takes his fiancée there.
She suggests where to go. He didn't know about it.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yes, she's the one who ends up having to suggest, why don't we go to the field and neck for a bit. Because, again, it's like this issue of, like, again, this is my whole theory of the movie, is that beneath this awful...
I don't understand the arc at all.
But beneath this awful, crappy story, it's just like... It's like the classic interpretation of the movie, that this is fundamentally a metaphor for someone's repressed homosexuality. That the entire experiment, the creation of this perfect man...
Well, I don't know about
that. Or perfect boy in this case, which adds a whole new dimension of kind of
I think
gross perversion to it.
They have to establish how he knows about Lover's Point. And anyway, he knows about Lover's Point and remembers it for the face scene.
Right.
Is that she knew about it already.
Right.
Which means she's maybe already... There's always...
she's more experienced than him.
There's already a suggestion that she's been around town a couple of times.
Right, exactly. But that's the thing, is that, like, in order to establish that, there needs to be this complementary... Again, on one level, it is just... He's just repressed in general about sex. Like, he doesn't seem like a sexual being. He seems like a guy who gets off totally on his work.
Right.
But like then again, it becomes this thing of like, the object de jure.
Right.
Like the discrete object of desire is this thing where in his head it's just like, what is the way that I'm gonna make a name for myself? I'm gonna make the perfect boy. I'm going to make the perfect, beautiful boy with the hands of a wrestler, but the soft skin of James Dean. But yeah, so they go to Lover's Point. He has Teenage Frankenstein kill
Gary Conway.
Kill Gary Conway.
Who plays the Frankenstein?
Who then plays him when he gets his face in the last 10 minutes of the picture.
Well, he actually plays them all along, but to get a double.
Yeah, exactly. Right. He plays them all along, but in a 4-piece mask. But then he kills himself. As
far as I know, he doesn't say anything when he's in the car. He just nods. Did you see his face And I think he just nods. He doesn't say yes.
When they get out of the car, yeah, that's how you know that the double is in the
Right,
suit.
right.
Is that Gary Conway isn't talking
Right,
anymore,
right,
and they
right.
didn't have time to ADR, I'm guessing. So there wasn't a lot of investment in sound design for this movie. I do know that much. But anyway, so yeah, he kills himself, and then. So this is the only part of the movie that was cut out that I can identify, and it is in the trailer for the movie, the American trailer, is that there is a scene where you see Gary Conway's decapitated head in the laboratory, where you see it in a cage. Like, why it's in a cage, I don't know.
I never
it's
remember that. I didn't see it. I never saw that.
I'll show you the trailer eventually, but yeah, so like
Okay.
again, but it gets to the point of like again we're narrowing the window of this idea that A.I.P has developed, which is that monster movies are not horror movies and sci-fi are not broadly speaking for general audiences. They are specifically for teenagers and young men in that 16 to 25 demographic who what they really want to see in a movie is sexual appeal, rock music, and gore. Just lots of blood and lots of violence. Every 10 minutes someone needs to get killed or someone needs to take their clothes off. It's not quite there yet, but you start to see, like, even at this time, there's this
It's building.
it's building.
Right,
Yes,
right.
it is building.
Right.
And just to put and Strzok himself was not really happy about that. He tried to as much as possible make the violence implied rather than depicting it, so like it was basically just an unhappy enterprise for him altogether. But I did want to go ahead and read this review published in the New York Times on January 30th, 1958. So again, these movies run for so long. So it's released in the Thanksgiving season. It doesn't reach the Paramount Theater in New York City where it premieres there until the end of January. That's how protracted these movies were. And so, okay, so the author of this is Richard W. Nason. His review of I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. Blood of Dracula does not get mentioned. As if by grim coincidence, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein arrived at the Paramount yesterday at a time when the city's newspapers were carrying banner accounts of the deepening crisis brought on by teenage violence. It is difficult to disassociate what was happening on the screen from the day's occurrences in the real world. Both were concerned with acts of physical violence. If you discount any immediate connection between the mass media and the temper of the culture, then the film warrants little attention. It is the old story of the mad scientist played by Whit Bissell who wants to advance human progress by creating the ideal human being. In this case, however, the automaton enacted by Gary Conway is a teenager assembled from the limbs of other teenagers. This is, in one sense, abhorrent. It forces one to acknowledge the impression that such films may aggravate the mass social sickness euphemistically termed juvenile delinquency. Since a whole series of movies slanted to the teenage market is expected in the months to come, it may be as good a time as any to raise the question of what effect this further indulgence of the cult of teenism ultimately would have. In this particular film, there are graphic displays of human dismemberment. Before one such act of surgical perversion, the mad doctor's assistant says, "I have no stomach for it." That would be a plausible reaction for any adult who had read the day's headlines about teenage crime. So
I think he got carried away.
I think he's for the time, you're an adult, and I'm thinking, again, there's all sorts of little things that could probably play up the perceived violence of the movies. Like the fact that it's in black and white, probably,
Sure. Rebel Without Cause, or something like Marlon Brando and what's the one where these are Lee Marvin, and these are violent films, and it's not suggested. And
then inevitably
here the psychology isn't there of the meanness, but in the movies it is suggested, which is even stronger.
Yeah, and then and you're absolutely right. So as mainstream movies that aren't genre films, movies that are more straightforward dramas and romances or comedies, as those movies start to get more action-oriented, violent, maybe a little more liberal in terms of their sexual and romantic themes, that only makes the emphasis in the, the lowbrow medium, in the genre culture, that only puts the drive even further to make these more violent. And you can see, and again, obviously there was a huge mass hysteria going all the way from the beginning of the post-war period to this time of the idea of the juvenile delinquent. The idea, which is iconic of the baby boom. This idea, which is basically just a reference to the fact that there are lots of teenagers running around nowadays who have lots of leisure time, nothing to do with it, and basically no supervision, and occasionally, kids like you, they're making pipe bombs, they're making makeshift rockets, they're tying firecrackers to cats' tails, and on one end of it, it could get serious, youth gangs definitely become a problem, but that's more of a problem of working class immigrant, and it's a problem that's definitely coded and associated with racial prejudice. This author, on the other hand, seems to be operating under a much more general thesis,
generalized, yes,
which is that the mass media, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, which, number one, the implication there is he's treating it like a mainstream movie. He might not think it's a particularly good movie, but he's treating this low-budget, independently made horror movie as being just as prominent as any mainstream movie, which in some sense tells you, well, yeah, it's premiering at the Paramount Theater in the beginning of January. It's this is just after the New Year's season. This is the big thing that's playing at the biggest theater in New York City. This is a mainstream thing, and so it becomes this thing of, this is the mass media degenerating the psychology of teenagers. This is what's inuring them to violence. This is what's reinforcing the conditions where you have all this juvenile delinquency. And so I decided, all right, I've got to find out a follow-up to that, because I would love to know what happens after. And so I found a piece from March 16th in the New York Times, written by Irvin Rubin, and it's a profile on American International Pictures and the success that they are having while the Hollywood major studios are just struggling to keep afloat and compete with television. And, and part of the article is just sort of poking fun, at both A.I.P. and major Hollywood, where it's the article will mention that, A.I.P. is making a bunch of money by not worrying about whether their films are well made or not. It's basically all hype and publicity. But here's the part where James H. Nicholson weighs in on the violence in his movies. Our stories are pure fantasy with no attempt at realism, Mr. Nicholson states. Because of this, it is difficult to see how anyone could take our pictures so seriously that psychological damage could occur. I have 3 daughters aged 16, 15, and 13. They've seen every one of our pictures. Yet I would not allow them to see other types of pictures. Westerns, for example, which strive for realistic brutality and violence. In our concept, each of our monsters, we strive for unbelievability. Teenagers who comprise our largest audience recognize this and laugh at the caricatures we represent rather than shrink in terror. Adults, more serious-minded, perhaps, often miss the point of the joke.
That's true.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because, it does tie back in with Invasion of the Saucermen, doesn't it? Because that was a more explicit comedy. But right there, James H. Nicholson is giving the game away. It's it's not that we're making deliberately crappy movies. It's that we're making...
farcical.
Exactly. It's I think that's so interesting because on the one level, he's saying, look, our films are such obvious fantasy, no kid is going to take them seriously, which is a brilliant way of turning the tables around to say, actually, your kids are more insightful than you are. Right. They understand that this is bullshit. They're coming here to laugh at the movies, not to take it seriously.
Right.
And I guess that is true.
It is true.
Well,
it's true. There's always an element, even though although I think I Was a Teenage Werewolf is a little more tragic.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's a little more effectively made. You know, it's like the filmmaker was better at his job. Like, that was their first mistake. It's like, all right, this movie isn't funny enough. It's too well made. But yeah, keep going.
So he came out with this one. Yeah, I mean, I don't find it any kind of violence that would be... I don't remember any kind of effect of the movie. You know, other than, you know, just...
You didn't even remember it.
Yeah, I did remember it. It's just that I don't think it's... You know, I thought it was a better movie when I was younger than when you look at it as an older person looking at it.
Yeah.
But it's funny still.
Yeah,
it's still funny.
And that's the thing. It's like, I think my whole point with Invasion of the Saucermen is that
it would have been adult because the kids don't know what Shakespeare is.
Yeah.
Then when he quotes these freaking lines, as if it's some kind of classic. I mean, you almost want to burst out laughing. What's he talking about?
And I think with Invasion of the Saucermen, I made this point then that I think the movie would have been funnier if they had played it straighter. I do think that's the weird thing. Like, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein was terrible, but I think I enjoyed it more than either I Was a Teenage Werewolf and Invasion of the Saucermen, because this is precisely it. This is the pure cinema of American International Pictures at this time. They're not deliberately bad, but there's like a misanthropic appeal to it. It's like liberating in a way. You're just watching it and you're just getting into the spirit of this is a total farce. And it's interesting because, again, like with Invasion of the Saucermen, it seems so prescient of something that doesn't really get recognized in horror movies until, like, the 80s and the late 90s. Like, you know, nowadays we think of self-aware horror as being kind of a recent trend. But here it is, you go all the way back to 1957 and you already have these horror movie producers outright stating, it's like, yeah, we know people are laughing at our product. We don't care. That's what we're appealing to. People want a puerile, silly, ridiculous fantasy that's full of blood and sexual appeal, and that's what we're gonna freaking give them. I think we should take a brief break, and then when we come back, I do want to talk about a movie that, again, like, I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, but I think it is probably, technically speaking, the best made of the four movies that we see, which might, now that we've read through this, like, now that we've worked through this sort of development and reception of I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, that might actually be the problem, that it's too well made. We're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about our B picture, Blood of Dracula.
Who am I? What am I doing? I'm living a nightmare. A horrible urge comes over me. I feel a strength that's almost frightening. It takes possession of me. I must do something awful, but when I try to remember, all I can see is you.
forgot to mention the best supporting actor of the whole film, which was the alligator.
Right.
The alligator.
I did forget to mention that. Yeah, like there's this. So when they're disposing of the limbs that
There's
they
a
don't
million
need,
different ways to do it.
There's a million. Yeah. So like I was just trying. Like at that point, because I knew it would have had to do something with disposing of a body. With some animal that he's got down, like he's got a chute in the laboratory that he just sends the body parts down. And so the first one I guessed was a lion. I don't know why I went with lion. There was no way these guys were going to be able to afford a lion. I then guessed dogs. I guessed pigs. I don't know why I guessed pigs. I think that might have just been
pigs will do a damn good number on a corpse.
I'm glad you said
There's
that before I did.
There's a movie where they drop the bodies into a pig thing.
Yeah, in Hannibal, there's a part where
and
in Snatch, that's how they get rid of the bodies. Because yes, pigs. So
pigs will take it.
Our dear listener, if you're ever in a situation where you need to quickly dispose of a body, all you need to do is find the nearest pig farm. They will go through bone like butter.
Yes.
Yeah. So pigs are very hungry, very vociferous animals. There is no more violent or voracious creature on the planet Earth than the pig. But somehow
this guy has a.
Yeah, I guessed python,
you
and
said
that was
python
close.
And I was dying because I said you're getting close. You're in the reptile family.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it gets back to it's like number one. Again, all of the scientists in these movies live in these freaking mansions. But like this mansion, that's the other thing. This mansion had to be This mansion had to be made before or built sometime decades before. But it just has a chute that goes down to like a sewer where there's an alligator. But how do you who commissioned this? Who accepted the commission for the alligator tank?
I mean, and then what's with the key in the door? That had to be so strange.
Yes, I forgot about that. Yes, there's another scene where it's okay, so anyway, so Frankenstein has a key to get into his laboratory, and Phyllis Coates.
It looks like a normal key to me.
Yes, she goes to get the key copied because eventually she just gets sick of the. Yeah, Phyllis Coates dies in the movie. She gets killed.
She deserves to die. I have to say it.
Okay, but
she deserves to die. It just means so stupid.
Well, yeah, for being devoted. That's the other thing. There's this weird way where the sexism of the movie dovetails into the depiction of women is just so horrid in these movies that eventually you have to get to the point where it's dude, honey, you can do better. And if you're really obsessed with this guy, then you're right. She kind of deserves what she gets. But anyway, yes, she does get a copy of the key made. And again, just like there's this Bavarian guy in I Was a Teenage Werewolf who does the exposition drop to the sheriff's deputy about, all right, this is clearly a werewolf that's doing all this stuff and nobody believes him. For whatever reason, the keymaker in the movie is a Bavarian guy who says, oh, the only times I've ever seen keys like this is in my home country. But we don't ever get to see the key. There's not even an insert shot of the key. It's not a special key.
No, it doesn't look special to me. I thought it was one of those old time,
But that's
But why would you
But
do
it's
that?
not. It's not. There's no insert shot, and it's clearly just a key. But no, it's a special Bavarian key. It's a key that is only created by the.
It seems like
it is a key that is only possible to come from the
Frankenstein's castle.
Exactly. It's got to be a special key, but yeah, she uses that to get.
That was so
this
funny.
Movie is so.
Well, you see why it's funny. But the other thing I want to mention before we get away from the fact that he's the alligator, which, like you said, the absurdity of the whole thing, but it does, is that the reason why adults miss the point.
Just the fact that there was a New York Times film critic who could not look past his own belly button.
You have to remember that kids have a neuron called the exploratory neurons. They don't look for reason.
Right.
So
At that age, you're very
not
libidinal.
shocked. You're not,
Exactly.
You don't get PTSD as a kid. I mean, the idea is that's an adult.
You have to like actually see someone die, or you need to be through a traumatic situation.
I mean, kids tend to manage. So these kids, they're not going to get freaked out by it. They're going to love this because it's part of their exploratory nature. They're not looking at any kind of discernment or or analysis when they're looking at a movie. So when I look at it...
Yeah, they just want some puerile entertainment.
Yeah.
They're just like, they have nothing to do. Again, this is the thing that defines the baby boomer generation. It's cheap. They have a lot of disposable income, a lot of leisure time, and nothing to do with it. There's no internet. The only thing you can do is either go to Lover's Point, and if you don't have a girlfriend who you can go to Lover's Point with, or you don't have a car, which probably means you're not going to have a girlfriend, you're going to go to the movies, and you're going to laugh at the stupid bullshit.
Right.
All right.
I just wanted to mention that, and I want to mention those 2 points, not the idea of the... But the key thing you brought up, you started laughing because you said, what the hell is this all about, a cave? And why would he have it specially made like a door that would be different than any other door in modern America?
You also mentioned that, like, at this time it was legal to just go ahead and get a key copied.
It was.
Whereas these days it's like, oh, that's a very easy way for someone to just get rooked.
Well, I hate to tell you the truth. One of my friends
Especially by
still got one done today for the university, but I don't want to go into that.
I might cut that out.
They don't know where I work.
It's very easy to Google.
Right.
But yeah, anyway.
And again, and one more point. Well, we can go on.
No, you go ahead. What's the one more point?
Let's review the next movie, then I'll talk about the point.
So our second, our B
Which I think
picture.
is a better picture.
Yes, this was the... all right,
but not as fun. Not as fun to watch.
Let's just say that, again, this is an issue of film preservation, because this is the... Unlike I Was a Teenage Werewolf and Frankenstein and Invasion of the Saucermen, this is the only film of this sort of quartet of movies that A.I.P. made in 1957, where there is a commercially available print of it, which is in the original widescreen aspect ratio. It's in high definition. I don't think it's restored necessarily, but it is in good quality.
Good condition.
And that was Blood of Dracula. We managed to find it through Shout Factory. It was available for streaming. And so just being able to have that instantly gives you a better appreciation for the film as a film, because you're able to watch it in a way that's as close as possible, short of actually seeing it in a movie theater, to what the creators initially intended. And I think we're both in agreement that, like, as far as Strock goes, there was clearly a little bit more investment in this movie.
Or they rolled the money that they made from the previous films into this one. If it came later, I think that's what happened.
But again, it's like this would... These both would have been made in the span of 2 months. These both, so like literally right after I Was a Teenage Frankenstein,
that doesn't make any sense then.
Yeah, they would have had.
I like it because they also to mention, if you want to stick with just the way the movie's crafted, and you can comment because you know better than I, it had a gothic feel to it.
Yes.
So there's a return to some of the other original movies that we talked in this series about the gothic feel. It had that gothic feel to it. Chiaroscuro,
chiaroscuro lighting, very noirish.
Right. And the other thing is that what I loved about it is that there's no pretense. Carpathian Mountains comes up a couple times, like I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Yeah, because again, these screenplays are clearly just made from a template. It's almost a beat-for-beat remake of I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
You know more about it than I, but the technique of the transformation is the same. You focus on the eyes, you do the wavy wipe, and you back away. And
instead of a werewolf, it's a vampire. Yeah.
Right. And I thought that was... and it's done better. Yeah. Well, actually, you have to admit that the upside-down scene where he changes first
Yeah, that was
pretty
that
cool.
was
Yeah,
that was very
yeah,
cool
yeah,
in that
yeah.
movie. But yeah, you're definitely right that there was a little more investment. There was much more investment
Yeah.
in this movie. It's a much more personal looking
Yes.
movie, especially
Yes.
the opening.
That's
the
a good- that's a good
unlike
way of-
I Was a Teenage
Yep.
Frankenstein, which opens with this patently boring exposition dump where a bunch of scientists just go through the rigmarole of explaining who Frankenstein is in a movie about Frankenstein. It opens on this dark, rainy, dreary night as this, this teenage girl is being driven by her father and
her
her
stepmother, new
and
stepmother.
her new, much younger,
6 weeks.
6-week fresh stepmother to the private girls' school in
Right.
some upstate. I'm guessing kind of upstate New England. It's got to
That's
be
what
like
sound.
some,
It has that feel to it. Yes.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so, but yeah, it's much more noirish. It's much more like even stuff as simple as like that's the other thing is like
I like
I
the
Was
way
a
you
Teenage
say-
Frankenstein is a lot more impersonally filmed.
I agree 100%
Most
with
of it
that.
is conducted in
I never
wide.
thought of that, but you're right. You're right. It's
with
impersonal.
but with the Blood of Dracula, there's much
there's
more
craft.
close-ups.
Right.
There's much more emphasis on the expressions of the actresses and their faces, and I guess
Like I said, and the editing was perfect.
yes, very well
So
edited.
Your take positions was perfect, and or near perfect. But let's say that.
Yeah.
But like you said, I like the topic. I like the thing that you mentioned. It did feel like it was personal.
Yeah.
That this was a personal crafted film by Strock, I guess.
Well, it's written by the same guys, but it seems like Strock put a little
Yeah.
bit more into it.
Like he really concentrated on.
And maybe that's just a function of Cohen being a little bit more hands off, but it does seem to show. I do know that Sandra Harrison, who plays the protagonist Nancy Perkins, our teenage our teenage character who's being basically furloughed into this girls' school so that her father can go ahead and gallivant with his new younger bride, and who obviously has a lot of misgivings about this whole situation. I do know that Sandra Harrison, Cohen initially didn't want her for the film. He was adamantly against casting her, but eventually Strock was able to get her into the picture. She does a very good job. The acting overall is much better in this movie.
Yeah.
There's a very strong cast here. And the two main players here are, again, Sandra Harrison as the protagonist and Louise Lewis as Miss Branding, who is our typical stock scientific villainess, the woman who's going to turn her into a vampire. I guess going into it, I guess the only thing other than that I have to say is that, again, this, as far as these sort of, the beginnings of this teen-centric cycle of horror and science fiction movies, this one is unique in the 4 films we've seen because it's the only one that focuses on a primarily female cast, a movie that is centered on and driven by strong female characters who operate in the absence of male characters. Are you aware of the Bechdel test?
Sounds familiar.
Okay, so Alison Bechdel is a cartoonist and a comic author. She's probably best she's best known for a series of graphic novels that she did. But back in the 80s, she started a comic strip, an independent comic strip called Dykes to Watch Out For. And so in Dykes to Watch Out For, there was one strip in which there are these two characters who are talking about whether or not they're going to see a movie. And one of the characters says that she has a rule that she will not go to see a movie unless it qualifies for 3... It satisfies 3 qualifications. The first qualification is it has to have more than one female character.
Oh, okay.
The
Gotcha.
The second qualification
Right,
is
I know what you're talking
those
about.
female
I've seen this
characters
before.
have to talk to each other. And the third qualification is they have to talk about
Right.
something other
I
than
did.
a man.
I did it, but it's also called the Bechdel.
Yeah, the
Wallace?
Mo Better
Wallace?
the Mo Better movie rule, the Bechdel rule. Like, it's not really a rule. It's more of a joke in the comic strip. But I just wanted to.
Bechdel Wallace test.
But I did just.
Representation of women in fiction.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
It's a
And it has 3
and
parts, right?
it's a joke in the comic strip, but it is kind of a fairly especially when we're talking about movies made in the 50s and in the 60s, these really sort of oppressive times in terms of how dominant male voices were in American filmmaking.
In this case, it's the opposite. They look like dunces. The men look like dunces. They look like props.
Yes, this is like
They're MacGuffins to move the thing along, and not really.
Yeah, exactly. There's this. Like, I wouldn't say it's a progressive movie because there is a kind of anti-feminist bent to it. But I would say that there is there's definitely a progressive nature to the film where it is centered on this female character, but also the supporting female cast is very strong in this movie. Like these you know, and I guess it sort of dovetails with the fact that, okay, so preceding all of this teen horror cycle, there was already an established genre of teen movies. Now, the thing that I've noticed in teen movies of the 50s and early 60s is that if they're about boys, the social concerns they tend to concentrate on are very active in nature, and they're very social in nature. It's juvenile delinquency, it's gangs, it's violent pathology, it's this idea of wanting to break out and fight against things. There is a corollary genre of teen movies that focus on women. It's just that these stories they're either the sort of the variation of the juvenile delinquent movie, where basically it's about a girl who's for lack of a better term, who's a slut, who's jailbait, who is this woman who's a femme fatale, who is just totally libidinal and histrionic and is the death of men and manipulates people and stuff like that. But the other obvious precursor to this movie is the women in prison movie. The idea of women being put in this situation where they are put in this confined space, whether it's an actual prison or a reform school. And I do think it's interesting that
it feels like a prison, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I do think it's interesting that like the principal of the school, or the superintendent, she does state explicitly at the beginning of the film, this is not a reform school. But you do get this, but yeah, as soon as Sandra Harrison's character goes among the other schoolgirls, you do get this impression of it being kind of a prison.
You passed your first test with flying colors. You didn't snitch. There's one thing we can't stand around here, it's a snitch.
I'm glad I made the grade, but don't give me an A for conduct. I like to handle things in my own way.
Don't be a meathead. I'm just taking an interest in you, because you've got spirit. Just remember, there's no such thing as a lone wolf at Sherwood. We can make life awfully miserable for oddballs.
And there's a little bit of sexism in the sense that, like, because in any movie that's written by men about women, the first thing that we learn about the women who are in this all-female setting is that they are obsessed with getting men. Right. They are obsessed with it because it's like men are like the droplets of water and they're all these sex-starved teenagers. And so there's this one man who's the groundskeeper who they all...
Really, an unassuming,
just a dullard. Just an unassuming
Like she
yokel.
tells him, tell me you have a headache. You had a thought. Or
yeah, exactly.
Like that.
Yeah, because he has an exclusive relationship, but like he takes turns.
Right.
But like again, they're so sex starved that he basically takes turns with each of them, pretending to be their boyfriend, and she has to, and his girlfriend has to tell her, tell him.
Or engaged, right? They're supposed to be engaged.
They're supposed to be engaged.
Ever hear of a census?
Yeah.
If they ever took one at Sherwood, Eddie would be penciled in as the whole male population. And Eddie's the exclusive property of Birds of Paradise. We take turns dating him.
What a catch.
That's all there is, except on holidays. We divide him up like a jug of water in a lifeboat.
One swallow to each girl.
Oh, now I get it. King Farouk. The lawnmower.
Myra, move her way up on the list.
I'll give you a better idea, Myra. Scratch my name off. Fall off that cloud. I've got a real boyfriend.
Wow. What a frosty chick.
Well, that just leaves more water in the jug for the rest of us.
Any way you pour it, I'd say you've got more jug than water.
That's for nothing.
What did I do?
It's what you were willing to do. I heard you every word.
Listen, lunkhead, you're not the dream boy you think. If there was more supply around here, there'd be less demand.
All right.
And don't forget you're engaged to me.
Yeah, but it's a secret.
Not from us. You know it, and I know it. Remember that.
Sure, baby.
I have to share you, but I don't want you to be so enthusiastic about it.
Okay.
And don't forget, cut your date short tonight. Say your head hurts. You've been thinking.
But again, like, there's a sexism to it, but there's an interesting power dynamic here where there's almost a legitimization of these teenage women characters. Because, yes, they're kind of obsessed with puerile things, but there's also this investment in the idea that they do have their own agency. They do think and act consciously in the absence of not only men, but in the absence of any authority figures, whether they're men or women. I guess it was particularly enjoyable, and I'm wondering if that might have been part of the reason that there's more of there's an obvious creative investment in the movie that there wasn't in I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, because it is different. It is a different kind of story. It's like, you know, because even if you're a male director, it's like you have to think like, oh, a movie that's just mostly women characters that's concerned, you know, it's like eventually it's the same way that it kind of falls apart with I Was a Teenage Werewolf, where at a certain point it becomes about the adult authority figures again, and now in this case even more compounded, the male cops just trying to figure out the mystery and stop the next murder. But at the same time, like I'm hard pressed to not endorse the movie just based on the fact that it's thoroughly compelling all the way through. If for nothing than the women performances, everyone does a pretty fantastic job.
I think so. Yep.
They seem to be taking it way more seriously than anyone in I Was a Teenage Frankenstein was taking it seriously, even though their dialogue is just as ridiculous. So yeah,
well, it's not too ridiculous, but then I like the idea, like you said, reusing themes, and I think there's a deliberateness for doing that, right? I think that there's a deliberate way he uses a transformation. There's a deliberate way of having a embedded song. I'm trying to look on my cell phone.
That's another thing. That's another thing that they
characters were really the songwriters of those songs, and that was their launching point for maybe, I don't know whether Eeny Meeny Miny Mo belongs to that guy.
Yeah, in I Was a Teenage Werewolf, there's a musical number called Eeny Meeny Miny Mo, where one of the supporting characters sings it. There's another musical number. This is a scene in which these
Puppy Love.
Yeah, Puppy Love, where like the passed around groundskeeper character, he brings two of his local college friends over to the girls' dorm for one of their midnight parties.
Right.
For their late night parties. And so he has a song number called Puppy Love. Luckily, this one is on beat. They did not. They successfully synced up the singing with the music for this one.
I just don't. And it's always what amazes. I guess what amazes me is that it's not unusual. Like we had a band that was called the Heart something, and they had
the Heartbreakers.
Heartbreakers.
The Johnny Thunders band.
No,
I'm thinking of
locally.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of the New York band that started punk rock.
The Heartbreakers or something like that, and they made
like this was a thing that local
a
45.
Yeah, they made a 45, and we used to play it at a disco place, the place where we had bagels. I forget. It was like a soda jerk place, and so. But yeah. So I thought,
that was a thing. So yeah, it's not totally inaccurate.
No,
that was a way that a lot of
the money.
You
pay $5,000. It's probably a lot less than that to cut a piece of vinyl.
Yeah,
and you make copies and you put into the jukeboxes. So
it would usually not go farther than that.
No, that's it. But that it's an aside. But I want to ask you whether you know whether those particular actors singing those songs are actually the ones that use that as a break, or I don't get it. Was it really just written into the song?
No, I think these were written for the movies.
Okay.
I don't know if they were released.
But why did they
I don't know
credit,
if they.
Though? They get credit within the actually said.
Well,
there's
certain
a song.
writers get credit. I don't know if it was the same singer or actor. I think like like it wasn't unusual for like there to be like a pop song in these movies and then for A.I.P to get like a promotional single printed for it.
That's what I'm asking you.
But that's the thing. I haven't had the ability to look on like usually for something like that I'll look on like Discogs.com, which is basically a great repository for people to put up information on like available prints of songs like.
Yeah,
but yeah,
anyway.
like again, it's like they're sort of ridiculous. At least in the context of the movie, it's sort of this heightened, ridiculous ephemera of this guy who, yeah, he just brings his own instrumental 45 to a party so that he can sing over it.
That's kind of funny.
It's not quite the way that they like. At that time, it would have probably been more akin to like there's some garage band, you know, like just four teenagers who, you know, like the Kingsmen or the Sonics or something more to that effect, and it would obviously be more rock and roll. Like again, it's the same problem with Eeny Meeny Miny Mo, where it's like I'm listening to this song and I'm just like, this is not rock and roll. This is vocal pop. This is not even remotely the same thing. They still like the one thing that they're trying to appeal to about the rock generation, they still have not quite bared it down. So like yeah, like and you know, there's a whole like sort of like I mean, it's better than... It sounds a lot like Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, too. Yeah, it's also... Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. See, it's the same beat.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. It's like, I don't think that was done... I don't think that was a promotional thing.
Okay.
I think that might have been...
All right.
And just because it's so identical, and also, again, it's not rock and roll.
Yes,
and you were arguing with me about this.
It's like, rock and roll.
It's at the...
No, it's rock and roll. I'm telling you, that's the...
Where was the part in that song where you rocked, and where was the part where you rolled?
That's what rock and roll is like American Bandstand. A lot of the songs are that. They're close to that kind of beat. I mean, the idea is that there are songs... That's the beginning of rock and roll. That's all I'm trying to say, is that is rock and roll.
Here's how rock and roll goes. Right. And if there's a piano, it does not play at that tempo. It goes much faster than that.
I don't know. I just think that it's... Anyway.
Yeah, like, where were we? Oh, yeah, Blood of Dracula. So, okay, the plot of this movie, girl... very upset teenage girl gets put into a reform school. Not a reform school, but like, yeah, a private, like a kind of charter school upstate. She has a boyfriend, but like, you know, and all the other girls are like, oh, you have a boyfriend? But yeah, she's like, you know, she's separated from everyone she knows. She's on her own. And so there's this professor at the school, Ms. Branding, and I guess she's like the chemistry teacher. But again, like a lot of the scientist characters in these movies, they're kind of eccentric. They kind of go into multiple disciplines. And this is the character who has the absolutely most inexplicable motivations of any of the evil scientists of these four movies, because it's sort of similar to, again, like I Was a Teenage Werewolf, it's this idea of a repressed power and this repressed primal essence in the nature of people that just needs to be brought out. Whereas in I Was a Teenage Werewolf, like Whit Bissell's character's whole idea is that in order to stop a man from destroying himself through his like continued acceleration of stuff like the nuclear bomb, he's got to return to his primal self.
Right.
Whereas in this one, it's very similar where the professor explicitly mentions the bomb. She explicitly mentions this idea of increasing aggression.
Right.
But her plan is sort of similar.
To show that it exists.
Right, to show that there's this innate essential power in individual people that can then be weaponized and maybe like be like a check or something.
I have no idea.
Exactly, it's totally
inexplicable. Just to prove that it exists, so to not push it any farther than.
It makes very little sense. Right. It seems to only cohere in one other aspect, which is that because Miss Brandig is a woman, and she says this explicitly in the first scene where she has like a sort of protege with her who's helping her before Nancy, Sandra Harrison's character, before she comes into the picture.
Right.
She's got a protege who's working with her, and she tells her, "Oh, my thesis wasn't accepted because, well, all these guys are men. They're not going to listen to women."
Right.
Yes, I got my thesis back again.
I'm sorry, Miss Branding.
Save your sympathy and try to learn something from this. We live in a world ruled by men for men. They won't even consider my thesis. They mock me, my work. But they're convinced that they're on the right track. And before they're proven wrong, and I can do that, they'll destroy the world through reckless experiments. No one can calculate the hazards of radiation. Reckless fools. They search in the wrong place. When I can demonstrate that there's a power strong enough to destroy the world buried within each of us, if only we could unleash it.
But how?
I can release a destructive power in a human being that would make the split atom seem like a blessing. And after I've done that, after I've demonstrated clearly that there's more terrible power in us than man can create, scientists will give up their destructive experiments. They'll stop testing nuclear bombs. Nations will stop looking for new artificial weapons because the natural ones, we, the human race, will be too terrible to arouse.
And so there you get the exploitable element. There's the feminist undercurrent. That's what makes it different. So that's the other thing is that there's almost this implied idea of she's specifically associating the bomb and war with men, with patriarchy,
probably some
yeah, exactly. No, totally. Yeah. And the power that she's planning to weaponize is the essential power of women. That's what she wants to do.
Right.
She wants to bring out the natural. She wants women to recognize you're a lion, you're an animal. You can you can fight the man and sort of basically put a check on.
What I don't like about it is that, first of all, what's improbable is you don't send a thesis in by mail order or whatever, and you don't send it in handwritten. I mean, whatever it's typed. Second of all, you have a thesis committee that review. You can't just send a thesis That's not. I mean, but let's get away from the absurd. The other thing that's interesting is that you go back to Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania again. So
she's got a medallion, an amulet that she can use to. So that again, it's like this weird blurring of the line between she's a chemist again. But she's also some kind of regression psychotherapist. Again, it is basically a remake of I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
That's exactly right.
And she uses this amulet because that's the thing, is that Nancy, Sandra Harrison's character, she's the perfect subject because she's got all this pent-up anger and rage, which is focused on her father. And so she's isolated. She has no one else.
Like
and so
Landon in I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Yeah.
He had repressed anger because his mother died, whatever, or something happened, and the father. So it's like that. It's the same thing. You have this weakness or this sort of like tweakable kind of energy.
And she uses this amulet and basically just turns her into a vampire.
Which doesn't make sense.
A secret vampire that seems to manifest at random moments. Like, it actually, it's like, so, like, the first person she kills is just one of the girls.
Yeah, it doesn't have any sense.
She just kills random people. It's like, it doesn't seem to be particularly, there's not a lot of, once the deaths start happening, it's basically just random characters being killed because it's convenient. So there's not a lot of tension there because it's like it doesn't seem like there's a logical progression because once she's achieved her plan, once she's turned her into a vampire, and again it's the same thing with I Was a Teenage Werewolf where it's like why on earth is this releasing of some essential aggression turning you into a vampire?
Why not a primitive creature?
Right, exactly. Unless, like, that's supposed to be the point. Like, maybe she just doesn't understand the power she's using, but, like...
No. I think, like, even Whit Bissell in the first picture, he knows that he's going to be something like werewolf.
Right.
But that's not... The original man is not a wolf. The original...
Man is some kind of primal ape.
To give you an idea, is
like Altered States or something.
Right.
Where, like, you turn into this primal
right. Altered States
monster.
is
not even, like, man or beast.
Is a good example.
Yeah.
Right. It's you turn into something primitive.
Or Monster on the Campus. Yeah.
But that's not by...
Yes. I
mean, either one of them.
That's by people who cared.
But I think it's cool. I think I like it because of the fact that both if I was a Teenage Werewolf, it is kind of freaky that it does emerge to be a werewolf. What I don't understand is why they're not surprised that it's a werewolf and a vampire. Why? Other than the fact she's using an amulet, theoretically from Transylvania.
Right.
And probably Dracula's
Well, she
amulet.
verifies it. Like, she says so.
She went there herself and verified it.
Yeah, I had to go there. Yeah.
Right.
It's like obviously there's not a lot of point in dwelling on, like, the logic of the movie.
Both of them get killed by the creation.
Yeah, both of them, eventually, yeah. So basically, if you can imagine, well, you don't have to imagine, I'm just telling you, it's the same exact plot.
It is.
Beat for beat.
Yeah.
The only difference, is, and the thing that makes it interesting,
right,
is that it is woman-centered. And so there is also this, like, so,
well,
like...
it goes into the whole genre of Wasp Woman, where you have
this idea of...
women-centric kinds of characters,
but, like,
you
also,
don't see too many of them.
But also this specific idea of the feminine monstrous,
right,
of women themselves representing this being that is historically oppressed, but that's the thing. It's that's where we get to the weird ambivalence of it, because there is this feminist undercurrent to Miss Branding's motivation, but the point is obviously that, you know, by letting loose these dark feminine forces, that she's actually the bad one. It's the male cops and the male authorities who are all the good guys. You notice that the superintendent of the school, the principal, she's not the one who's able to do anything. There's even a whole scene where she's talking to, like, the mayor of the town who she's personal friends with, and he's all like, I'm going to do the best I can to make sure this school stays open. Right. Whereas she's like, I don't know what to do. I've been running this school for decades, but apparently I don't know. I have no power or agency anymore. Right. So, like, there's, like...
Right.
It's obviously a very, you know, it's... Once this feminine power is released, it becomes basically just this avenue for specifying why it needs to be controlled.
Right.
Because if left to her own devices, misbranding is just going to destroy us all. The only natural order is one where the men are on top and the women are starved and repressed at the bottom.
Right.
There's also even a kind of, again, just like with I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, there's almost like a psychosexual undercurrent to it. And I don't know if you got that, but, like, I got the very distinctive impression, especially in the scenes between Miss Branding and her protege, who I can't remember her name. There's almost like a lesbian subtext to it, where that's, you know, like, and even if you think of, like, the implications of blood, you know, you have this idea of...
Well, that may be poor writing. That may be, maybe what they're trying to attempt is to show that women can work together in that kind of thing and have a strong drive for perfection in terms of getting research done, things like that. But the writer wrote it that way, but I don't know, maybe it's just a poor way they wrote those scenes. I don't think it was meant to be psychosexual. I just think it just emerges that way, but it does have that undertone. I have to agree with that.
The only reason I would say that it was probably deliberate is because, again, this is a very, again, like the non-horror based antecedents of this movie, the reform school movies, the women in prison movies, that's a very common trope of these movies, for the central antagonist of the movie to not be a man, not to be a man in a position of authority. The men always mean well. The men in a position of authority always just want to make you a proper lady. Right. It's this woman who is, like, in a women in prison film, it'll be a warden. It'll be this sort of butch or rigid or frigid character.
What was the woman in... I understand what you're saying. I think you're right. I think you're right. That I guess I have to admit that's true.
And again, it's weird. Like, I have this weird ambivalent feeling towards the movie because of that. You know, it's like, I guess if on the one hand it's better as an example of a film to watch from this period, because, you know, it's nice to watch a movie where, you know, this is damning with faint praise, but it's nice to watch a movie where the misogyny is now just subtextual rather than what we're used to,
right?
Where it is just so overt and so surface level and so gross. Like, we've seen a lot of movies where men are just behaving in ways that, and we're gonna see a lot more where men just behave in ways that are absolutely grotesque and horrid to women. And so it is just, like, you know, nice to see a movie where, in a way, it is just a movie, you know, it's like, you know, like, and it might not have been deliberate. I don't think there was a deliberate anti-feminist bent to the movie. But I think, you know, like, maybe it was just like, yeah, that might be cool. A woman protagonist and a woman antagonist. Like, they're just, that's it.
Right.
They're just women. They're
right.
Women characters doing all the roles that men would usually get in this movie. Just that they're women. What? You know, I guess I appreciated it on that level.
I just thought it was a better picture. I thought the writing was better, and I think that you're right. You're absolutely right about I think it was more personal to the director.
I think the only thing else I wanted to comment upon is that, like, look, we would be remiss if we didn't, you know, despite the fact that these movies are basically, you know, they're basically remakes of one another. The only exception is Invasion of the Saucer Men, and that's because while Cohen was involved in it, it was obviously a much more personal movie. It was written by someone else. You know, it was a more personal project for James H. Nicholson. But otherwise, these three other movies are dead-on remakes of one another, back to back. But they all sort of
have their own little...
In their template, they do follow the same sort of basic theme, which is the premise of there's a youth who is in a unique state of need, whether it's physical or psychological, and they are actively they're either neglected by society or their parents, or they're actively exploited. Tom Weaver in Attack of the Monster Movie Makers, he did interview Cohen about this, and he one thing Cohen said was, I have always felt that most teenagers think that adults, their parents or their teachers, anyone that was older and had authority, were the culprits in their lives. I know I felt that way when I was a teenager, and in talking to many teenagers, I found out that that was how they felt. And so in doing pictures primarily for the teenage audience, I thought that this theme would strike them just right. So there you have an example where, again, it's one of those lucky scenarios where we don't need to debate whether this stuff was intentional or whether it's just us reading too much into it. There you have it, the producer himself, the egomaniac who the director had such problem with. He's blanket admitting that's what I intended. That's what I was making this about.
And also the point that you don't know what the subconscious context is, right?
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, like, these
movies...
When
you paint, right? You paint, you look at something... Right. I mean, you don't know what the subconscious drive is, even though they may not admit it, but it comes out the way. This is the way art does. All art does that. It brings out things in your interpretation of it. But if you ask them point blank, would you, no, I didn't mean to do that. But it came out that way. And that means it did. I mean, there may have been some fingerprint of that.
I mean, part of it, I think, just comes from a certain underestimation, where I think a lot of times people conflate the fact that a movie is poorly made with the idea that the people who made it were unintellectual, or that they didn't have a critical approach, or that they didn't just appreciate the artistic, you know, because, like, you know, despite the fact that these movies have the same basic template, it's very imperative that, like, so much of them are concerned with psychology.
Yes.
So much are concerned with the idea of someone who's supposed to be like a therapist,
right,
or a counselor or a doctor, but who is manipulating you psychologically to try to make you something other than what you naturally are. And it's like, I think it would be, even if we didn't have that quote, it would be ridiculous to say that Cohen and Candle didn't intend these things.
Right.
Because
but I think that, and also the, like you're saying, the intent, but going back to how kids would view this,
yeah,
I still don't think they would say, I don't think it would even register with them that, I mean, look, you get kids that see this, they realize no one operates this way. They can see the farce separating from reality.
Yeah, and I guess that's the contradiction, isn't it? Because Cohen is saying, like, here's my explanation for why I made these films about what I made them about, versus James H. Nicholson, who just comes in and says, look, the reason kids come to see these movies is because they're trying to have a laugh. They're just trying to kill a few hours.
Yeah, this is still pretty funny. I mean, it's not as funny, but
it's almost. And again, it's that weird thing. It's almost
looking at it. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's almost not as funny because it's better made.
Yeah.
Like again, it's so awful. It's bad to say, but the critical failing of the movie is that it's well made to a certain degree.
Right.
And I do think, just on the point of, Bill Warren talks about this in Keep Watching the Skies, which is that, the problem with the problem inherently with what Cohen says there as far as his intent with making these movies, the way he made them, is that, as Bill Warren notes, despite the fact that he doesn't, here's the quote itself. They deal with the domination of a young man by an older, wiser, and crazy one. But the whole point is that, like, that in and of itself does not translate to, like, a social critique.
Right.
There's no way to and we did get into this debate about, before I even read what Bill Warren wrote about the movies, we even actually had that debate about I Was a Teenage Werewolf, where I was saying that it's not just Whit Bissell's psychotherapist character, that there's a whole social critique going on, where the police and the teachers just funnel the kid into this situation where he ends up being manipulated,
right,
and the problem just becomes repressed even further, and then just comes exploding out on everyone else. And you had made the point that
it's like Rebel Without a Cause.
Right, exactly. And you had made the point that it's just some mad scientist who could, it's like, and there is that disjuncture, and that's the other thing, is that especially with Blood of Dracula and I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, it's even less nuanced than I Was a Teenage Werewolf, because there's no funneling effect. No. There's no direct causal connection between people who are well-meaning in positions of authority basically letting you be exploited by this, like...
Well, also there's the conformity issue, right?
Right. Yeah, there's no such thing. It's just a mad scientist who's turning you into a horrid monster of some kind. All right, go. Tell me what you just read.
What? This time, Jerry Blaine, who sings Puppy Love, which he also wrote. Blaine previously had written Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo for I Was a Teenage Werewolf. How do you like that?
Yeah, and it looks like they did for Puppy Love, at least they did print an RPM. I'm looking at an image.
Isn't that something?
I'm looking at an image of a Flamingos Records RPM, which says Puppy Love, Jerry Blaine, from the American International Pictures Blood of Dracula. So yeah, they did press a promotional RPM.
Isn't that something?
Oh, it was Friday night and it sure was hot. I had my daddy's car with a convertible top. We drove by the light of the moon above, and my baby said, oh yeah, let's make some puppy love. She looked at me and smiled so sweet that I felt like jumping right out of my seat. I knew what she was thinking of, 'cause her eyes said, come on, let's make some puppy love. Well, then she gave me that crazy look, and before I knew it, I was really shook. So I drove like mad, and I didn't stop, 'cause I knew that if I did, I might blow my top. So I drove her home, 'cause it was late. and ask her for another date. She said, that's real cool, my turtle dove. We'll take another ride and make some puppy love. Look, and before I knew it, I was really shook. So I drove like mad, and I didn't stop, 'cause I knew that if I did, I might blow my top. So I drove her home, 'cause it was late, and asked her for another date. She said, that's real cool, my turtle dove. We'll take another ride and make some puppy love. Making puppy love, puppy love.